What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Corvette Weekly. We're here with a new guest tonight. We actually have Ken from Squirrel Cage Garage. If you guys haven't seen his YouTube channel, he actually helped me out back in the day with my ZR1 without even knowing it. At the time, I didn't know him, but he was messaging me whenever I was making my videos about my ZR1, whenever I had a bad spark plug and all this other stuff. And I was watching his videos, and he actually had talked a lot about a lot of the same problems. So he's more mechanically inclined, we'll say. Um, so it was really awesome meeting him, and then we got him on for the live tonight just to change things up a little bit, guys. You know, that's what I wanted to try to do, is just kind of keep this thing fresh, keep it going, always have new interesting guests that can bring something different to the table in between the twice a month viewings with Brandon and David. So anyway, guys, welcome back to Corvette Weekly. Like I always start these things off, this is brought to you by NCM Insurance. If you guys want to check them out, the links are in the description down below, and they can always save you a bunch of money on your insurance. So check them out in the link down below. On step number 5, it's going to ask you where you heard about us. Make sure you put in there horsepower obsessed, and they will give you the best possible rates. While you're down there in that description, you can also click on the link to win a Z06. So in that Z06 link, you're going to get 50% more entries than you would if you clicked on that link anywhere else. So you might as well take your chances and get 50% better odds to win for free. So check out both those links in the description down below. But let's move on, guys. We got a lot of the same names in here. I'm gonna try to scroll up to the top. You guys talk a lot before I even get on here. I love it. I love that because it means it's making a community, which is exactly what I wanted to do with this whole thing. I wanted this community to explode. I wanted you guys to meet each other while in the chat system, meet me, meet you, just meet everybody. That's ultimately what I wanted to have happen here, and that's what it seems like is happening. So yeah, that's my spiel for the setup here. But KP says he already hit the thumbs up. That's awesome, guys. Let's try to get to that normal 100 mark by 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Smash the thumbs up button, guys. Really helps the channel. Really helps us know you're liking what we're doing here. So we have a lot to talk about tonight, and we already kind of talked about it. Well, talked about some of this during the launch and everything, but there's more to talk about because there's a lot of stuff that during that launch wasn't talked about. I'm sure you already know the big one is price. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't have the answer to that, but we got a lot of really good, we'll say, foundation for speculation on the price. So we're going to go over that, but we do have a lot of other information that we're going to talk about with the C8 ZR1 that you guys are definitely going to want to hear, so stick around. Let's see. Monday night equals HPO time. I like it, Dennis. Yeah, so Jeremy, I wanted to tell you it was Brad. I think it was Brad. Chili Pepper was having a similar code. Yeah, he was having a similar
For
code. There's
which codes?
he
For
is
which codes are they talking about? The ZR1?
no with the C8 Z06. Jeremy is having an issue with idle creep disabled.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard anything about that?
No, I can't. I can't say that I have. I've heard like little bits and pieces here and there about the idle creep being disabled, and from what I can gather, from what I've heard and been able to decipher so far, it seems like it kind of seems to be, unfortunately, going back to the transmission problems that some of these cars have had. Sometimes I think if there's an interruption on the CAN bus network and the computers can't talk to each other, they kind of don't know what each other is doing, so they disable certain features for like a safety factor. But I haven't heard too much about it otherwise. I don't know anything specific other than that, though. I know that there was a recent thing that came out about a new the transmission update too,
Yeah, I saw
with
that.
a lot. Yeah, the TSB that came out, and who knows if that has something to do with it too. But otherwise, I haven't heard too much about it because I haven't heard of that being too common of an issue.
Right. So
So
what I've noticed, Jeremy, is what I've been thinking about, I should say, is the latest TSB to come out for that didn't really have anything to do with that so much as it was draining the battery, I guess. The
yeah,
the TCM was staying on after you put it in park and turn off the car or something along those lines. But the one thing that popped into my head that I remember is there was a TSB pretty early on with the 2023s that there was a wire harness that ran from the engine bay into the car that was getting pinched and possibly severing wires. And I can't recall off the top of my head if that did anything specifically with the transmission or what it was that was actually affected if those wires did get pinched. But that is something to look into. So,
Yeah.
um,
I've also seen this problem quite a few times in so I worked in dealerships for years, and I can tell you I've seen problems. I used to work for Saturn a long time ago, and there was a problem with a certain wiring harness in the driver's side footwell that it was getting pinched and clamped on it, and a lot of those wires inside there, just like I was telling you, were all CAN bus circuits and things like that. And those are all, low voltage or, and they're very, very, very sensitive to any change in voltage. So if you have things mixing and near, like kind of like pressed up against each other and chafing, even like a tenth or 1/100th of a volt can just send all kinds of
yeah,
things and all kinds of haywire. Yeah. So,
yep. Yeah, so Joe is asking when we're arriving at Carlisle. So DBM Racing, Brandon will be right behind my booth. I'm going to be arriving somewhere around afternoon on Wednesday. And then, of course, we're all staying until the end of the show. So, Joe, I'll see you there as well. Brandon and David will obviously be there. I know Shane, who's the thumbs up guy. I don't know if he's in here tonight, but he'll be there under my booth. For those of you who know Dana, he's the guy that's in a lot of my videos. He's going to be there with us as well. Um, but yeah, uh, Carlisle is coming up very, very quickly, which is odd because someone just told me I can't believe we're already into August. I feel like just yesterday we were getting into 2024 and now 8 months in already. It's crazy. But
yeah. I'm kind of the same way. I still kind of like to think like a lot of people are keep talking about the C8. I feel like that thing just
just
came
came
out like
out.
20.
Yeah.
But it's like now the thing's 5 years old now at this
Right.
point, And at this point, the C9 is not even that far away. So
That's crazy.
kind of
Yeah, it's gonna be and it's gonna feel like no time that we're talking about the C9, which is really, really crazy by itself. But until then, let's talk about the C8 ZR1 because it's what we're here to talk about today, guys. So uh let me see. There is apparently an update though. Brandon, when did you see that update pop up for you on your C8? I drove mine a couple days ago, but I haven't seen anything pop up on mine yet. I'm curious what the update's for, but let me know what when you saw that pop up. Until then, guys, what we're going to start with here is the C8 Corvette ZR1 that's been seen or spotted a bunch of times now without any camo on it. Now, if you guys have been following the ZR1 saga, we'll call it, basically what happened with it was GM actually said that they wanted to reveal this car and show it outside of the camo because they couldn't continue to test it with the camo on it. Now, initially when I heard that, I thought, that sounds a little fishy. But now it was literally the next day we were seeing the C8 ZR1s without any camo on them. And this is just one of those situations. We actually have two different ones to talk about tonight, but I want to show you this one really quickly. So this is the new Riptide Blue, of course, but this is the ZR1 without ZTK package. And you can see this is on the Corvette blogger. We have a 2025 Corvette ZR1 prototype parked on the street in downtown Detroit. Now, the last time we saw a C8 Corvette parked on the street of downtown Detroit, it made the headlines because someone stole the wheels. I don't know. I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but the wheels ended up on eBay. It was a big thing. But this thing's looking really, really solid here. Like this is the non-ZTK version, so this is kind of the one that looks the most like a Z06, but it's still just that hood just is fantastic looking. But yeah, these things they're popping up in the wild here, so the odds of you seeing one just like kind of cruising around are pretty high at this point. You might spot a ZR1 literally driving around. I mean, just look at that thing though. Friggin'
I wouldn't be surprised too if a lot of these things driving around now that the camo has been taken off and kind of revealed to the world, if some of these now driving around, unbeknownst to anybody who may or may not know what's going on, if they're actually even Zorros.
right.
Because the only real way you'd be able to tell is if you see
That
that
radiator.
vertical
Yeah.
intercooler in the front. And at that point, it's kind of like, well, everybody knows exactly what it's going to physically look like.
Right.
So why not just drive? Because the only difference is going to be probably more than likely just the electric motor in front, you know? So
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those were actually Zorros too, you know?
Yeah, and actually, who was it here? Somebody brought it up that there's Z06 wheels on here. I actually wanted to talk about that because you can see the front wheels on this particular car are Z06 wheels. Now, right off the bat, for those of you who are eagle-eyed are going to notice, okay, those are Z06 wheels in the front, but ZR1 wheels in the back. Why is that? That's because the ZR1 hub in the rear, the bolt pattern is actually spaced differently because of the extra torque. So they can't put Z06 wheels in the front and the back has a different lug pattern to make sure that the extra torque of this engine doesn't literally shear the bolts right off. So
Yeah.
that by itself, that sentence by itself sums up why the ZR1 is so absolutely insane. It literally has to have a different lug pattern so these things don't get sheared off because of the torque.
I
But
would really
yeah,
like to get a close up look at one of those things, like with the rear wheels, like you were just talking about, because as we know, a big thing with like the Stingray coming out and even the Z06, one of the big market things that people have bought is those wheel spacers to push the wheels flush up
right.
against the rear quarter panels. I hope and wonder, because obviously it's kind of hard to tell by the pictures unless you're super up close, is that since they changed that back part of it, if they have also kind of like corrected that as well too.
No, they didn't. So you're actually the second person to ask me that. And the first person thought initially when we saw the car on stage, they were like, "Huh, those wheels seem to fit a little bit better in the rear." They don't. If you look at a lot of the press shots, you got to get the right angle on it to see it. But they're inlaid, we'll say, just as much as they
That's
were
it's
on the Z06, which is really odd. I don't
disappointing.
get it.
You know?
Yeah,
That's so disappointing.
it's disappointing and it's weird because it's like the Z06, the front wheels fit, I would say like 99% perfectly. They could still
Hmm.
be a little bit better, but for the most part, they were fine. And then the rears are inset like an inch and a half. And it's very obvious when you're looking at the car's profile. So with the ZR1 now, if we want to fix that, it's going to be even harder to fix because now you're going to have to be very mindful of what wheel spacer you use, or else you might shear the lugs off the wheel spacer.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest with you, and this is just me personally, I've never been a fan of wheel spacers, period. I don't like the idea of them, and then you have like a spacer bolted to the hub, and then the wheel bolted to the spacer. I don't like the idea of it. But then on top of that, unless you get the spacer with extended lugs and that comes out, it's a little bit different. But even that, I'm not a huge fan of. But like you were talking about, with the unbelievable amount of torque that this thing is going to be making,
Right.
you put that with wheel spacers on, and you do that version of where you bolt the spacer to the hub and then you bolt the wheel to the spacer. That just no, I'll take the little inset over the risk of that. But
Yeah.
hey,
See, and
that's
but
just
that wasn't really so much a problem with the Z06. I ran my
yeah,
C8 Z06 with the wheel spacer for quite a while before I finally got wheels that fit perfectly. But
yeah,
it's less a problem with a car creating lower torque. I mean, the torque on the Z06 I think is 470, so
yeah. And even
it
then, you're still
double
not even making that until you're high,
right.
a little bit higher up in the RPM range. This thing is going to be making double, give or take, the torque of a Z06 at a very low RPM range, and that
Yep.
just Z06 is a little different because we all know the Z06 likes to live up in the higher RPM
Right.
range, and at that point, you've already got your momentum and inertia, so
Yeah.
those torque forces aren't really there, so it's not really an issue. But
Well, see,
yeah,
David says DBM Racing says they are limiting torque in first and second gear on the ZR1 to address this. Yes and no. So they don't really have to necessarily address it so much um, as they already have by spacing out the lug pattern. So the lug pattern on the wheel is totally different in the rear than it is on the C8 Z06 to address the extra torque. The problem then becomes the what they're doing with the torque in first and second gear is more so for traction, because
Yeah,
you can't just
it's
throw
torque management.
right, you can't just throw 800 torque at it in first gear and say, yeah, okay, go ahead. Like, it's, you're
Yeah,
just going to spin. I mean, I already spin
yeah,
in my Z06 with 400 less horsepower. So
yeah,
it's more so for that than it is for shearing these things off. But they wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to be an issue. But now it's going to be an issue for the third party or aftermarket, we'll say, because if they're putting these hub or yeah wheel spacers on there, their lug nuts that are on those new wheel spacers better be made out of some high quality metal, or you're going to shear them right off.
yeah. And to be honest with you, and that type of thing scares me too, because there's always like the high quality brands that put out high quality stuff, and I'm sure somebody's going to make something that is going to be good enough. But number one, they're obviously going to be, and for good reason, very expensive. But then on top of that, there's also going to be a lot of those knockoff brands that, and I'd like to think that if you've got the money to be buying this car, you're not going to be cheaping out on something like that
Right.
if you're going to buy it in the first place. But I mean, hey, you never know. I mean,
All right, guys, we got about 200 people watching. We should easily be able to hit the 100 thumbs ups by 8 o'clock. Please smash the thumbs up if you have a chance here. One question that I've seen pop up here a couple times now is about the air intakes. Yeah, right there. So no rear air intake vents on this hardtop convertible. And that is true. So this is something that is interesting that GM did address to some degree. They said that there's no air intake on the convertibles here, and that what that is literally a secondary air intake for the turbos. So this is on top of the big vents on the side of the car that are also sucking air in, that you also get with the coupe. You get a secondary version of this. Now, how much of a problem this will end up causing in the future, I don't know. But if I had to guess, something will be done differently with the convertibles as far as the tuning is concerned to address this. It might be minute, where you're talking about maybe a reduction of 1 to 5 horsepower, or it could be bigger than that, depending on how much air those vents are actually pulling in. Those vents are very reminiscent of the vents on the C7 Z06 and C7 ZR1. Even the Stingray had them, but they didn't have quite the covers on them. They're there to really just pick up the air as it's going over the car. So, yes, the convertible doesn't have it, but how big of a deal it's going to end up being, we'll see. Um, One other thing, I had a couple people ask me who Ken was. I introduced him in the beginning, but he is a fellow YouTuber. He runs a YouTube channel called Squirrel Cage Garage. Does a lot of the work on his own cars and everything, so he's kind of fitting for what we're trying to bring to the table here, which is more of a do-it-yourself approach to these live videos, and something that will give a lot of tips and tricks, and how to kind of maintain your own cars and everything. So Um, but yeah, Brandon said he wouldn't track with wheel spacers. Yeah, wheel spacers in general are kind of a weird topic. I don't really want to get into those too much at this point. The If you look on the internet, you're going to find guys divided right down the center. Yes, wheel spacers are absolutely fine, or no, they shouldn't be used under any circumstance. And to be honest with you, I'm right in the middle. You got to watch what you buy, because there are less quality wheel spacers out there, and then there's the better quality wheel spacers. Just like anything in the world, you get what you pay
yeah.
for.
It's one of those things too where you find like that topic where a lot of people are divided on like a catch can.
Yeah, same
Like,
kind of
oh
thing.
yeah, you need a catch can. No, no, you don't need
Yep.
it. It's just one of
and
those.
and yeah, Chopper Larry brings it up. He says people use wheel spacers on the track all the time, and a lot of times you have to, if you're running like a smaller rear wheel to get a bigger tire on it for any kind of drag strip use. You have to run a wheel spacer for stuff like that. Or even if you're doing it on the track, you need to run a wheel spacer to clear bigger calipers for track purposes. People do use them, and you can use
Yeah,
them safely as long as you get a good set. My
yeah,
concern is I can already see somebody who just spent 200 grand or more probably on a C8 ZR1 going on to Amazon and buying the cheapest set of wheel spacers they can find and throwing those on there. They're going to have a bad day, because it's going to,
yeah.
with this amount of torque there, it's going to be an issue.
And not only that, but you've also got people that are, going to buy the wheel spacers and might be buying, unbeknownst to them, what they think are good wheel spacers, but are actually poor ones too. So, and
Right.
that's just obviously a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit here, guys, is the the kind of the things that are going on with the ZR1 that weren't really announced really well, or if they were announced, they kind of fell to the wayside because a lot of channels came out with ZR1 information pretty much immediately right after the car was announced. If you didn't go through and literally watch the 20 plus videos that came out and like take notes on it, you're not going to know a lot of this stuff. Luckily for us, the mid-engine Corvette forum actually went through and detailed all these things and put them into one neat little forum thread. So we're going to read over a bunch of details on the ZR1 here in a second, and should it should give you guys a good idea of what this car is going to be. But before we do that, what I want to do is talk a little bit about pricing and about my speculation on what this car is going to cost. So me and Ken were talking about this a little bit before we went live, and it was if Chevy had brought us out the ZR1 at the initial 800 to 850 horsepower that we were thinking we were going to get, my guess was 140 to 150 starting price. Now that they brought out the car that's basically what we were expecting the Zora to be with over 1,000 horsepower, my opinion on this has changed. I think we're more likely to see a starting price point for the ZR1 just under 200 grand. And when I say just under, I mean 199,995. I really think that number for some reason is just like stuck in my head. I think we're going to get a starting price point right under 200 grand. What do you guys
I,
think?
I completely agree with you on that. I think it might be, I mean, depending on, the way it's set and everything, it's going to be, I mean, bare minimum, this thing is going to be at least 180 to start. No way it's going to be below that. Really, I think it's going to be around 190. I think 190 to 200 is going to be that like base, no options, starting price or whatever.
Yep.
And then like we were talking before, and then after, options, pricings, and, not to mention the markups that these things I'm sure are going to have. I, I can't imagine a way that some of these things, depending on how they're optioned out, after market adjustments or tack-ons or whatever, are going to be above 3 or 350.
Yeah.
And
So
which is sad in a lot of ways, but
the Michael McCurry says 150,200 loaded. Keep this in mind, Michael. The Z06 right now starts at 109.
didn't
You
they
can
just up it though?
Yeah, I think it's 111 now.
Or
It's either
yeah,
109 or 111, but
yeah,
that just changed. So we'll say even at 111, I can go on to Chevy's website and option out a Z06 and easily hit just under 200 grand. So
yeah.
if you add another 50,000 to that starting price, it's 200 loaded is not that's not where we're going to be. It's definitely going to be more than 200 loaded. But
Yeah.
with that said, someone also asked if we get all the trim levels. We don't. So with the ZR1, you only get a 1LZ and a 3LZ, which is really odd to me because the C7, they changed the naming scheme from LZ to ZR, but they're not following that with the C8 lineup. The C8 lineup is going back to LZ, 1LZ, 3LZ, whereas the C7 was 1ZR and 3ZR.
Which was
So
the same case for the C6
it was
also.
the
They
same
called
for the
that, it
Z.
was just one
Yep.
ZR or three ZR. There was no two. So,
But they were calling it ZR. But now
yeah.
Chevy is now calling it LZ, and it's the same thing. There's only 1 and 3. There is no 2, but they're calling it
Mhm.
LZ instead of ZR, which it's not a big deal, but it's kind of something that surprised me a little bit because I don't know why they would change that up for the ZR1. It's always been ZR. Either
It
way,
does.
you're only
Yeah.
getting 1 or 3.
I wonder if they're reserving that for the Zora.
That's
But even
possible.
then, but
Um,
even then,
I made a video a couple days ago talking about what I believe the Zora is going to be now too, because Taj was recently in a video talking about this, and he mentioned that the ZR1 is going to be the most expensive Corvette that we do in the C8 Corvette lineup. So how do you make the Zora a standalone car that's going to be more expensive than a ZR1 whenever Taj just said that's going to be the most expensive car we do? So either
which I think, I'm sorry.
two
Well, I was
options.
going to say,
It,
which I think is going to be the checkbox, like you were talking
yeah,
about. It's going to be a ZR1 Zora.
it's either that or the simplest explanation is he lied. I, I mean, that's the thing is like, and he can to some degree lie about that stuff to prevent people from guessing what's coming next. So I don't know, but
Yeah. Well, I
um,
mean, it wouldn't be the first time something like that happened. I remember a
right,
few years ago when the Demon came out, and Dodge was saying the Demon will be the most powerful
right,
variant that ever came out. There will never be anything more powerful, and that was the 2018. Well, then they came out with the Demon 170, which is obviously more powerful. But then they're just like, oh, well, this is now the Demon 170, and it's like, you
yeah,
know, so
right, and that's why I
yeah,
think the checkbox will make sense because then you don't have to worry about lying to people. The ZR1 still is the most expensive, but now you
yeah.
also get a performance a performance add-on, we'll call it.
Yeah, because it's a little technicality of way of
Right.
getting around it, you know? Yeah, so.
So Harold Atkins asks, "There's no frunk. Where is the plug for the battery tender?" So the plug for the battery tender is still actually there. If you look at the press release shots, you can see the battery tender and the button to release so you can get out of the frunk if you were trapped inside for some reason. It's still there. I know they already said that they're not done with the frunk design yet, so that button will probably disappear. But if I had to guess, that power outlet's going to stay there because you still need to be able to put it on a battery tender.
Yeah.
Um, there is a chance this too. Ron said this that maybe the Zora isn't going to be top of the line. This would be another surprise to me because again, if you want to honor Zora in a way that he should be honored, making his car anything less than top of the line would be odd. But the best way to do it without making Taj a liar is, like I said, making it a performance option that you check. So now you don't just have a ZR1, you have a ZR1 Zora. You know,
I
that
agree.
kind of thing.
I can't imagine any which way, shape, or form that the Zora is not going to be the top of the line
I
because then
agree.
they would not call it the Zora. I mean,
Right.
they put his face on the windshield, and, like I can't imagine any which way, shape, or form that that's not going to be the case.
I agree.
So
Michael McCurry says, "Does the frunk open on a ZR1?" Yes, it does. A couple of the press shots showed it open, but again, what you're seeing on the inside is not a frunk. It's really just like kind of rubber, plastic, air direct channels. But they're not done with it yet. They've mentioned that in almost every video I saw that the frunk part is not finished yet. It will look different once the car is ready for production.
yeah, it's basically going to be for service. There's going to be no
Right.
practicality use of that frunk in any which way, shape, or form.
Yep. G. Smith says, "I know a guy in charge of Corvette sales at a dealership in Michigan. He said all ZR1s will be 70K markup at all dealerships." That is definitely not true. Um, there are going to be your dealerships here and there. They're going to be very far and few in between that will offer this car at MSRP. I know that because I'm getting one at MSRP, assuming the price is right. But what you are going to see is that 70K is on the very low side of what these cars are going to be marked up to.
Yeah, a
Initially,
70K markup is definitely going to be low, if you ask me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Initially, these cars are going to come out at least 100 over, possibly 200 over. And if the car starts where I think it's going to start, you're talking about an easily hitting $400,000 for a Corvette. And I hope, I really hope no one out there is even capable of doing that because it only takes one person to do it. And then all of a sudden, all the dealerships are going to be charging 200K over. So
Yeah,
if
I
you're
really
that
think
guy, don't do it.
I really think a lot of the precedence is going to be set when the very first one of these things shows up at like a Mecum
It
auction or a
is.
Barrett Jackson,
It's exactly what.
just like the Z06.
Yep.
Because remember the first Z06, what did that sell for? Over $1 million, right? I
Well,
want to
technically, the
say,
first one was to Rick Hendrick, and he always, yeah, I think it was over three, but he always buys them for crazy amounts of money, and a lot of that
yeah,
money doesn't go to Chevy or anything. A lot of it's for
yeah,
charity.
yeah,
But that one aside, that one doesn't really determine the price. The first one to go to a Mecum from a normal buyer, that's what will set the
yeah.
price. And
That's going to set the tone because everybody's going to be paying attention to that. So yeah,
that's going to be scary too, though, because everybody's going to be paying attention, and the first one to take it to Mark or to Mecum, it's going to be crazy.
it's going to be, and you're going to have a lot of like this is the type of car that I think that you're going to see like once you do see it pop up at say Beacom or whatever, you're gonna have like some of the big names that come up to buy these types of cars, like a Jay Leno or Jerry
Yep.
Seinfeld type name or
Yep.
something to buy one of these things, you know. So
Yep.
and of course, money at that point is just going to be not even a factor for them. So, but
Yep.
you know,
So, where was it? Stephen Rapp says, Justin, did I hear you right? You are getting a ZR1? Stephen, I have an allocation, and if the price is right, which I actually am putting out a video tomorrow that goes more into this, if the price is right, I will be getting one. Based on what we're talking about here tonight, if I'm right and the price does start at $199 or more, I'm not going to be able to afford it, because I also refuse to take the car at a lesser, um, what's a lesser interior quality and all that stuff than what I have currently. So,
you're going to sacrifice options to just for the sake of having a ZR1
right,
versus having
I'm not going
more
to do that.
creature comforts.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My Z06 as we speak is fully loaded, minus the fact that it didn't come with Z07, even though it looks like it did. I don't want anything less. So if I can't get a 3ZR front end lift, all the good stuff with ZTK, because I'm not going to let that one slide this time. If I can't get that, then I'm not going to do it. But I can currently, well, once the car comes out, I have a spot allocated at MSRP. So I don't have to worry about the over MSRP charges. But even then, the car can't be 300 grand loaded. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's do it. Michael McCurry says it. Let's start a GoFundMe for the ZR1 for HPO. I'm more than okay with that idea, especially if this thing's going to be 200, 300K. We better raise some serious money, guys. But no. Yeah, Taj also said that what he's buying for his retirement is a Stingray. He's buying a C8 Stingray. So he's basically admitting you don't need any of this stuff. You don't need a Z06. You don't need a ZR1. And of course, I know that. I don't need any of this stuff, but that does not mean I don't want it.
And that just kind of goes back to what was being spoken about, like even last week and the week before about, okay, like the Z06, the E-Ray, the ZR1, these cars are all nuts.
Yeah, they're all good cars.
99% of the population doesn't need anything more than a Stingray.
Right.
And that's just, again, Taj saying,
Honestly,
like, look, the Stingray is so good that it's just.
Honestly, the population doesn't even need a Stingray. Like, the population needs a 90 horsepower, what was it, a Honda Del Sol back in the day. They came with like 95 horsepower. That's what the population needs. Or a go-kart, a moped. We don't need.
Which a Del Sol basically was.
Yeah, we don't need a 500 horsepower car, or in this case, 1,064. You don't need that to get back and forth to work. But of course, we want it, and that's all it comes down to. It doesn't matter if you need it; we want it.
Yeah.
But one other thing I wanted to mention here real quick, guys. Let's see where we're at. Thumbs ups, 117. We need to be way higher than that, guys. We got 230 people in here watching. Smash the thumbs up, guys, please. We got a bunch of ZR1 info you're gonna definitely want to see. Smash the thumbs up. Let us know you're liking the content. But over at the Mid-Engine Corvette Forum, again, we've got to recently see Tony Roma, not to be confused with Tony Romo. That is a common misconception here. This is not the former Dallas Cowboys quarterback. This is now the new Corvette chief engineer who's replacing Tatch. His name is Tony Roma, and he has already been spotted in a C8 Corvette ZR1. And I'm going to see how long it takes for somebody to notice the thing that I noticed immediately. Here's a picture of the ZR1 Tony Roma's driving. What's wrong here?
Where's the, I don't want to say it, but it's,
yeah,
it's very obvious.
So what's missing here, guys? Me and Ken both see it. We both know what it is, but what do you see that's missing on this C8 ZR1?
Or maybe it's not even a ZR1. It just has the wing on it. But
no, it is. We see pictures later that with the hood and everything. It's definitely a ZR1. There it is. Austin says it first. No split window. Yeah. And I noticed that immediately too. So I typed up a question, but before I could even finish typing up the question, it was already kind of answered up here in the actual thread. And it says that basically this is an early test model, C8 ZR1. So there is no split window on it. Now you can see in the smaller image here, it does have the ZR1 hood and wheels. So it is a ZR1, it just doesn't have that split window. So that tells me again that the split window, and I mentioned this in a live video, I think last week, that the split window looked like an last minute kind of styling decision to make sure that people knew that the ZR1 was not a Z06. Just one more thing to throw on there, because other than the split window, the only other thing that really says, hey, this isn't a Z06 is that hood. Because yeah, you got the bigger wing on the back if you get ZTK, but if you don't, the hood is really it. So what does
Yeah.
Chevy do? They say, throw a split window on there. And they had to have done that because this is one of their test mules that didn't have the split window on there. So
I,
yeah,
I, I agree with you on that because it almost kind of looks like, yeah, like they added it later on, which,
yeah, it looks
and
like
I
an
hate to
add-on.
kind of, I hate to kind of say it this way because it's not really what I'm implying, and this is just due to lack of better terms, but they just kind of tacked it on at the last second, and
Yeah,
as a result, that split window to me just looks just a little bit cheesier than the
yep.
whole rest of the car.
And I recently went onto the website where you can build your own, and I think the best way to build the car with the split window, because I'm a coupe guy. I'm never going to get a convertible in this. The split window is going to be there. The best way to do it is black, because black hides it. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, is it's like, it's weird, but it's the way it looks the best. Now, someone asked here, G. Smith said no split window because it's a convertible. It's not a convertible. This one here in this particular shot, you can tell that's 100% a coupe. So
Yeah, there's
it's, you wouldn't have the split window obviously on the convertible, but this is not a convertible in this case.
there was
So
actually a video that came out. I don't want to say who it was just in case I'm wrong, but a very large, well-known YouTube channel, like a professional company, put it out. And in the video, I remember the day that it came out, they had mentioned, it must have been an error, they said it wrong. They said, yeah, the ZR1 will not be available in a hardtop convertible. And I was like,
yeah, no, it
that's
is.
it 100% is, but they said in the video, and I was like, oh, I'm like, that's really interesting. But then I watched somebody else's video and I saw, they showed it right there, like this is the day of.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of a big error to make, but I didn't know if that was going to start spiraling out, and everybody's like, oh, well, they're not going to be able to get it in a hardtop convertible. It's like, I just can't see them doing that, but obviously that's not the case.
So Stupid Fast Truck says it will take aftermarket guys about 3 weeks to do the split window for the Stingray or Z06. Believe it or not, already done, baby. I've already
Yeah.
seen one car with a thing just slapped on there and it looks just like it. Now, of course, it's stuck on top of the glass, so it's not functional, but it's louvered and it looks just like the one from the ZR1. The car's not even out yet and people are copying it. That's how
Yeah.
fast they are to this stuff.
It reminds me of the old louvers people had in the 80s and things
Yeah.
like that, on the Camaros, and yeah, so.
See, now I'm on the side where I don't really love the split window look, but again, on a black car, if you do the split window in black on a black car, I actually kind of like the way it looks now. So it's all about how it stands out, because the one that they showed us at the
Yeah,
unveiling, the yellow on yellow, awful. It looked awful. And
I agree.
if that had been black, even on a yellow car, it would have looked better. But if you do black on black, it looks the best, in my opinion, of course.
I
But
agree. I think the black on black definitely looks the best. Me personally, if I was buying one, an option going out, and split window was an option, that would not be a box that I would check.
right.
But again, that's just me. But yeah, the yellow, it looked, it just like you said, it looked tacked on. It looked like, oh crap, throw that on at the
Yep.
last second. Let's make it look fancy.
And that's
And
I mentioned that in the last live where I was saying I thought that it kind of looked like Chevy was like, you know what, we don't have enough on this car to make it enough different looking than a Z06. What else can we do? And some guy was like, oh,
yeah.
we could do a split window. And everybody in the room was like, ha 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 ha. And they're like, you know what? You're on to something, sir. And then they throw it on there. So I think I honestly, after seeing the one Tony Romo's driving without it, I feel that that's probably the case even more so now. But um, yeah, that was another thing. Austin says, or a carbon fiber split option. I saw someone's video, and I don't remember which video it was. Someone said that that was going to be an option, that the split window was going to come in carbon fiber. And again, on a black car with that piece in carbon, I'd be okay with that.
I was
But
gonna say, black split, excuse me, a carbon fiber on a black car, that would look nice.
right,
Because that would be, it would still blend, but just enough of an offset, but that would look good actually.
yes, it would. So let's talk a little bit about some of the numbers here, some of the key features that were missed on the actual reveal of the ZR1. Before we do, we got to smash the thumbs up, guys. We got 230 people in here watching and only 130 thumbs up. That means 100 of you that are watching have not clicked the thumbs up. It really helps the channel when you do, guys. Please hit the thumbs up. It makes me happy. So let's jump over to some information here from, again, the Mid-Engine Corvette forum, where they have compiled a whole bunch of info on the C8 ZR1 that nobody really caught. I mean, some of this stuff you might know, but I bet you a lot of it you don't. So right off the bat, we have kind of a dyno graph here showing the difference between the LT6 and the LT7 power and torque curves. Now, when you look at these on what is basically a dyno sheet, it's pretty impressive whenever you see the difference in power here, how much higher the red lines are than the green lines. I mean, it's crazy. But obviously, one other thing that we're going to talk about real quick here before I get into these numbers is something I'm going to mention in the video that you'll see tomorrow, is that if you're a big LT6 flat plane crank sound guy, the LT7 is almost going to disappoint you because
Yeah.
it is so muffled with those turbos that you don't really hear that flat plane crank sound. And you can do whatever you want to try to fix that. New exhaust, maybe higher flow cats, maybe no cats.
It's not gonna change.
If it does it all, it still isn't going to sound as good as the Z06 with comparable mods. It's
Yeah,
just
it's not gonna change, especially since the turbos are so, because there's no way for you to change anything in between the actual exhaust flow of, say, the cylinder head where the turbo is, because it's right next to it. It's right there.
exactly.
It's going to be impossible
Yep.
to have a change in any which way, shape, or form.
Yeah, guys, hit that thumbs up. Brandon says it best. Hit the thumbs up. If you're on your phone, hit the X first, then hit thumbs up, and then you can bring the chat back up afterwards. Now, of course, switch lanes, you're right too. You don't get the flat plane crank, but you do get the turbine jet sounds. And I mean, that thing, it sounds freaking phenomenal. So
Yeah.
you're kind of, there's pros and cons is ultimately what I'm saying here. So
I would take the turbo sounds over a flat plane
yeah,
crank, and
yeah.
I know that I'm in the minority that would prefer that, but
So
I love those sounds.
we haven't heard enough of it yet to say for sure if I would or not. I love the sound of a turbo, especially if you can hear some sort of blow off valve. None of the videos have really shown us enough yet as to what we can expect this thing to sound like. I've seen
Yeah.
some videos where it's revving a little bit, even one video that revs all the way out, but I didn't hear a lot of turbo sound. Now,
And I wonder how loud it's going to be versus being in the cabin versus being
right,
outside
right.
the car.
And that's always the difference with the C8, because inside the cabin, it's never as loud as it is outside. But if you guys remember a couple weeks ago, I had Alex on here from Pete's. I honestly, I don't know how to say it. Pikes?
Alex
Okay.
Pikes.
From Pite's Performance. He just released a video of revving the Z06 with twin turbos, and all you hear is turbo spool. So
Yeah.
I don't know why that would be the case on his kit, but then on the one made by Chevy, you can barely hear the turbos. I don't know, but either way. Oh yeah, one other question I wanted to address really quick here, guys, is the GTD, the Mustang GTD. Somebody was asking on this. Yeah, Professor Corvette, thoughts on the ZR1 versus the GTD. You guys know my opinion on this. I think Mustang is doing the right thing. I think Ford's doing the right thing making this GTD. I think it's a cool car. It's a cool idea. It's a cool concept. My problem with it is they're building a car and acting like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it's basically a C7. And the reason I say that is because they're really pushing hard on the fact that number one, it's got 50-50 weight distribution. Number two, it's a transaxle, so the transmission's in the rear of the car and the engine's in the front, and that's to help balance out the car. These are all things we've seen done on a C7. The C7 did the same thing. So I understand they're touting that it's going to be under 7 minutes at the Nürburgring. That's great. Guess what? The C7 ZR1 already did that. So What is it exactly that we're getting here that's super special, other than the fact that it's basically a street legal race car?
What I think that they're kind of going with that is that the Mustang is kind of in a class by itself now, since the Camaro is gone and the Challenger is going away and things like that. So they're trying to make the Mustang. They're trying to make a very very special version of this Mustang,
Right,
you know. But I mean, I agree with you. The GT. That's a nice car. It's a beautiful car.
right.
Me, I would never really go for one because again, like you're talking about, the technology that they're using has been done before. They might they might be taking some of the lessons that GM has learned while doing that type of car and improving upon that. But I mean, honestly, if you're going to spend that kind of money on a Mustang GTD, unless you are just an absolute die-hard, hardcore Mustang
Right. Yeah,
fan,
you're not gonna
that
get
is
one.
not going to appeal to you because like it's going to cost me how much? Well, I can go buy plenty of other cars for
Right.
that kind of money.
And that's
For yeah,
I've had that same kind of argument with people, and they say, well, the C7 ZR1, which is the one I would compare it the closest to, isn't cheap either. And I'm like, no, but it's cheaper. Like you can get a C7
yeah.
ZR1 for under 200. You're not touching this GTD for probably under 3. And that's if you can even get one.
If you can find one,
Yeah,
yeah. I
because
don't know if
they're not
anybody
making very
has
many
one
of them.
yet. Yeah.
Dylan says, is GM posting official times on Nürburgring? I know they've done a lot of testing with the ZR1. That's to be seen. Honestly, GM hasn't posted official times at the Nürburgring for really any of their Corvettes. The ones that we got for the C7 were segmented times, and they were leaked by Jim Marrow. They weren't ever actually officially posted by GM. So we've got no official numbers for any of the C8s. Or no, we did for the Stingray actually. Yeah, we got.
I I don't think that they are ever going to post these times on the Nurburgring for that because honestly, if you ask GM kind of always takes a stance of it's like, well, what's the time of this car on the Nurburgring? Their answer kind of is, who cares?
Yeah, no
You
one's
know,
taking it
who
to the
cares?
Nürburgring. But
Because it reminds me of an old TV show like the Grand Tour, the same guys from Top Gear,
yeah,
and James May in that show, who I love that show, always made a very good point, and he was very, very, very correct. He's saying if a car is great on the Nurburgring, it will be absolute garbage in the real world.
yep, on the street. Yep,
And if it's great in the real world, it will be garbage on the Nurburgring
yep.
for obvious reasons. And that's why I think GM is just kind of like, who cares? Because
Well,
how many people buying a car are ever really going to take it to the Nurburgring?
the biggest reason why people do care is because the top dog supercars post their Nürburgring times. And again, guys,
Yeah.
smash the thumbs up if you are enjoying this content. We're still got 230 people watching with 162 thumbs ups. We can do better. You guys have done better, so let's smash that thumbs up. But yeah, the supercars are posting their Nürburgring times, and again, like a Porsche GT3 RS, if you've ever driven one of those, it's not, I wouldn't say it's garbage on the street, but it is definitely, the second you step in that car, you realize that car is built for the track. You're driving a
Yeah.
track car on the street because
And
the
it's in
suspension's
the real
tough.
world.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
suspension's stiff, the chassis stiff, there's no give to the car. It's not a comfortable daily driver. So what we want is something that's we want to walk a fine line right down the center where it can be comfortable on the street, but it can also do some track damage. And I think with MagRide, I think we kind of have that to some degree. But GM putting out this car's numbers, over 1,000 horsepower at the Nürburgring, if they came back with a number that's not as high as, we'll say, a GT3 RS with half the horsepower, then it's going to be like, well, wait, what's GM doing? They should be able to beat
Yeah.
this car. And that's what they're trying to avoid, if I had to guess. They don't want that.
Because a lot of people are just going to hone in straight on those numbers right off
Exactly.
the bat. And if the number is lower, oh, you're then they write it off immediately, you know?
Exactly.
So,
And
yeah.
honestly, I believe that is also one of the biggest reasons, one of the bigger reasons at least, that we didn't get a manual transmission in the C8 Corvette. A lot of people get into a manual transmission car, they go out there and they embarrass themselves and can't beat a Toyota Corolla or something. Then all of a sudden people were talking about this car negatively. But if you put a dual clutch transmission in it, there's really nothing you can do as the driver to really affect the outcome of certain races because that thing's going to handle itself. All you got to do is push the gas to the floor.
And that's going to be an argument that never ever dies is the whole automatic
Right.
versus automatic versus manual. And Um, there was a video I saw a little while ago, and I wish I could find it somewhere. And they specifically talk about one of the main reasons why the C8 is and never will come with a manual. Number
Yeah.
one, just the pure speed factor of it. You will never shift a manual car faster than a DCT or the newer automatics. Yeah, maybe some of the older ones. And I know there are people out there that claim, "Oh, I can shift it as fast as it." No, you can't. I'm sorry, you can't. You
No,
never will.
not a dual
So number
clutch.
one, number two, but because of the actual tunnel of the C8, the way it's built, if they were to put stuff in there to make it a manual transmission to accommodate certain things, they're going to compromise the rigidity of
Yep.
the actual structural frame of the car. And I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is people are always going to argue with this back and forth. The bottom line is I always said automatics are faster, manuals are more fun. Period.
Yep.
There's
That's
no arguing either one of those things.
up
And I'm
until
sorry to say, manuals are they're going to be they're dead. They are.
up until the well, right as the C7 started, all the way up to the C7 starting, manuals were still the faster of the two.
At the
At,
time, absolutely.
at the
Yeah.
time, yeah. After the C7, that everything switched, the automatics shift faster, and with dual clutches especially, it doesn't matter how good you are at driving a manual transmission, you will never outshift a dual clutch transmission. It's just not
No,
possible.
no,
But it
yeah.
but like you said, I kept my C7 ZR1 for two reasons. Number one, it's a ZR1, it's a C7. But number two, it's a manual. And I want to be able to have that fun car to drive every now and then that's not just an automatic. So,
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, I would. The manual is always going to be more fun. The people that love the manuals are always going to be more fun. Like you're saying, back in the day, I remember, when I was a kid, you had a manual. The manual was actually the option that you got because the manual would get better gas
yeah.
mileage and it would, actually be faster.
Yep.
But this is, 30 plus years ago, Now it's not even close.
Yeah. And honestly, Paul Junker says something too that this is also the case. He theorizes that the reason GM doesn't time their cars in the ring is because they cannot get fair testing conditions. That is part of the issue. Even with the C7 ZR1, Jim Marrow said that whenever he was to get in the car and run the ring, GM made him do it while it was raining and while it was cold without warming up the tires. He said if it had been raining and he had a proper warm up time for these tires, that he would have easily crushed 7 minutes. And even with those bad conditions, he still hit 7:04. Segmented time, he was at 6:57, I believe it was. He said that if he could warm up the tires properly, he'd be well under 7 minutes. And I believe segmented time, I believe he'd probably be at about 6:52 in that car. And that's
Well,
pretty impressive.
didn't they have similar? They had similar problems with the C7 with the Z06 going around the Nürburgring. Also, like they tried. I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong. There was three times I think they did it. 2 out of 3 of those times it crashed.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what happened on the third one, but there's never been a C7 Z06 posted time because it never finished.
Yeah,
It
for
never
the same
completed.
reasons. Between weather and the fact that you can't get on that Nürburgring by yourself, you're always fighting other people who are driving around and crashing, possibly leaking fluids, and then they got to shut down the track for the day. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But Steven says, Justin, will you be selling your C7 if all goes well? Professor Corvette already answered that. He says, prediction: Justin will never sell his C7 ZR1.
You never will. You'll hold on.
That is the answer. I'm not going to sell it. So you guys are going to
I
see.
wouldn't either.
I have a video coming out tomorrow that's going to detail exactly how I'm going into the ZR1, the C8 ZR1 possibility for the channel. The video will tell you all you need to know tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. Anyway, let's 20 more days until Corvette's at Carlisle, guys. So again, just like last year, I'm going to have Shane with me. Dana will be in my booth, and then David and Brandon from DBM Racing and Brand's Garage will be right behind me. I'm going to be right beside AWE. Be sure to come out and say hi, and not just say hi. Stick around, talk, have some interaction. I love to talk to you guys. That's what I'm there for. I'm literally, of course, I'd like to see the ZR1 this year, but at the same time, I'm there to talk to you. So don't feel like you can't come up and talk to me. I want you to come up and take every single second of my day. So come up, hang out at the booth, talk. Let's make this a big thing. I want this to be huge. Hang out at the booth. You're gonna have me, Brandon, and David. We can entertain you guys all day. But
I really need to try to get out there one of these times, but maybe next year I'll find a way to get out there for it. It's tough to get away, especially all the way across country.
Nate's going to be there too. I should have known that because he's actually going to be in my booth. So Nate with his E-Ray with, I don't want to give it away, but he's going to have an undisclosed new mod by then. He's going to be at the booth. And the thing is I'm going to have 3 cars at my booth, 2 Z06s and 1 E-Ray, and they're all pretty much the same spec. I love it. I can't wait to see this. It's going to look so friggin' awesome. But anyway, guys, no, I got you, Nate. I got you. I got you. But where are we at with thumbs up here? We got 230 people watching. We got 174 thumbs up. That's still a weird discrepancy, guys. Usually there's only a couple that don't hit the thumbs up because it's those haters out there. But smash the thumbs up if you're liking the content, guys. I'm going to get into the ZR1 info right now. There's a lot to cover here, so here we go. Again, over at the Mid-Engine Corvette forum, we got the dyno graph, which is cool, but all kinds of information down here. I'm going to just read through this pretty quickly because there's a lot. Look at all this. It's a wall of text. Vehicle information. 0 to 60 is estimated 2.4 seconds. 2.4 seconds. Quarter mile, 9.5 seconds at 150 mile an hour plus. Top speed, 220 miles an hour. This is an estimate, but based on what they've said in the release videos, I bet you it's right around there. 1,200 pounds of downforce with the ZTK package at top speed, 1,200. The C7 ZR1 was 1,000. The exhaust provides 37 pound-feet thrust at peak power. So basically 37 thrust. Basically
37 pounds of, like, if the exhaust alone was acting like a propulsion to move it forward. Yeah.
Right. So it's only a matter of time before we see flying Corvettes, is what that means. Better ride than a Z06. Now, this is something that someone brought up in the chat a second ago, and this is something that was interesting because I saw this talked about in a video where they were talking about the power of the car can make up the times on the track better now because the car doesn't have to ride so stiff. So basically the Z06 rides as stiff as it does because it needs to be able to handle better due to the lack of power. Whereas the ZR1 now has so much power that it can ride a little looser, but still put up ridiculous numbers because of the power that it has. That's an interesting one. The ZTK Aero is the ZTK only aero is optional on the base car without suspension and tire changes. So just like with the Z06, you can get the Z07 Aero without the Z07 suspension. It weighs 165 pounds more than a Z06. The split rear window on coupe, which is only on the coupe, which vents engine bay, hot air, of course. Coupe engine air intake on rear hatch. We talked about that already earlier today, about how that's only on the coupe, not on the convertible. ZTK adds rear brake cooling ducts on coupe's hatch. So you have to have the ZTK for that. All of them come with carbon fiber roofs. Now, the C8 in general, all of the roofs are carbon fiber, so this is just saying that it's exposed carbon fiber. The tires are the same size as the Z06, 275 front, 345 rears. New design 10-spoke carbon fiber wheel option. New brake package, longer fibers, dissipates heat better, and the front is 400 millimeters, 13.7 inch, which is larger and thicker for more thermal mass. Now, this is one thing that has come up a lot on the release video of the ZR1 was that the ZR1 had the biggest rotors ever in a Corvette, and I was like, what? Because they're the same exact size as the Z06. They're thicker. They're not diameter wise bigger, they're thicker. So something to keep in mind. Larger rear wheel bolt diameter due to increased torque output. We talked about that. They did beef up the 8-speed dual clutch transmission, obviously, to handle the additional power. So there is a change to the transmission for that. No front.
Yeah, that's an interesting change. I'll come back to that. I want to actually mention something about that later.
Okay. No front trunk. We already talked about that. It's pretty much the same interior. There's slight differences on the stitching on the doors, but otherwise, interior is the same. We are going to get blue calipers, wishbone rear vent for rear brakes. Clint Simone is a GM development driver. 3,670 pounds is the dry mass, 236 pounds more than the Z06. That's weird. What is it talking about up here then with the
What was
165? Hmm. Uh, 80 to 200 to 80 is 24.5 seconds, which is 22% faster than the 2019 ZR1. 22% faster. That's pretty cool. Jessica says secondary port fuel injection, is that to help clean carbon from the engine? That is a secondary function of that. It will help clean carbon from the valves, but it's actually there to just get more fuel into the engine.
it certainly doubles up as that. It
Right.
definitely helps, but that is not the primary point. It's just an added bonus.
Yep. Let's see what else we got here. Not limiting production volume. So GM says that they are not going to limit the production of this car. I think that whenever they come out and say that, I think that the reason they're not going to limit it is because the price is already going to limit it. 15 total heat exchangers. That's pretty good. Cargo volume is roughly the same, 9.1 cubic feet. It's a little smaller because the frunk is gone. It's LT7 engine, 5.5 liter V8 flat plane crank, twin turbos, 76 millimeter turbos. We already know the power. We know that, for those of you who don't know, it is an 8,000 RPM redline. Now it's not 8,600 anymore. Most powerful V8 in a production car, 193 horsepower per liter. Virtually no lag in the twin turbo setup here because of the way that they have it built with electronic wastegates. There's an added scavenge oil fuel pump for the turbos, so there's 7 in total instead of 6 like in the Z06 engine. 850 horsepower was the original goal. Engine guys always overperform. GM actually had a video talking about how they accidentally, I love when they do this too, they accidentally made more than 850 horsepower and they were making 850, and before they realized it, that they had hit their number, they were making 850 with the wastegates totally open. So the turbos basically weren't even working and it was still hitting 850 horsepower, which is crazy. 24 psi peak boost. 20 psi is pretty much what you're going to see the most of the time. Air system operates like 2 independent 4-cylinder engines, making 532 horsepower from 2.75 liters.
That is nuts.
Oh, God, the more
That
you
is
read about this car, the
absolutely nuts.
crazier it gets. Yeah.
A 4-cylinder engine creating that much horse, that is just blows my mind.
Secondary port fuel injection used at idle and employed 80% of the time. That's pretty cool too, because I know with the C7 ZR1, the port injection, I don't think that comes on until you're under full 100% wide open throttle. I don't think you get the port injection until then. They have beefed up piston, connecting rods, and wrist pins. I know they were thicker forged titanium. Compression ratio. This is where it gets interesting. It's 9.8 to 1. It's down from 12.5 to 1. So the 12.5 to 1 is the LT6 engine. They reduced the compression ratio, which if you guys remember right, I said that had to be one of the things that they could possibly do to twin turbocharge an LT6 is they had to reduce the compression and or the displacement. And that's exactly what they did. New head casting with ports at different angles. So basically, the majority of this engine is different. It's not just an LT6 with twin turbos slapped on it. New cam profile with timing with less overlap. That's going to affect the sound too. 2 separate intake manifolds with reduced volume, 1 for each bank. This one's good. Max fuel consumption, 2 gallons a minute at max output or top speed, 35 miles range, refuel under 10 minutes. So basically I saw another video that was saying from Taj that said that if you ran this engine at wide open throttle, that it would burn through all of the gas in 2 minutes. which is nuts. It's not. I
That
mean,
is,
this thing
yeah,
is not going to have great fuel economy, but I don't really care about that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. This thing is gonna be great. Then what was that other? There's another point that came out about. I don't want to say
The
because I'm screwed up, 'cause I
transmission.
can't remember about the transmission too. But a fun fact that they threw in there about it could like empty like an Olympic-sized
Yeah,
swimming pool
yeah.
worth of air
It
in like
it was
whatever
like
it was.
4 minutes. So an Olympic-sized swimming pool, if they could
Yeah,
convert it to sucking the water out of there, it would take 4 minutes for these turbos to empty an
to take
Olympic-sized
that
swimming
amount of
pool.
air to blow
Yeah,
it through, and
right.
that is just another just absolutely crazy. So it just so the numbers
Um,
that go along with this thing are just staggering.
Bruno says any possibility of test drives at Carlisle? Not
No.
likely. I will tell you, I know where the engineers stay at Carlisle, so I stay at the same hotel as the engineers do. So they always have the cars all parked out in the parking lot, so you can kind of go out there and look them over at night and whatnot, make little videos like I did with the Z06. But um, they're not going to allow test drives mostly because the car is not finalized yet, and it's actually illegal for them to allow anybody who's not an engineer to drive one of these things because if you were to get hurt in there, you'd be able to sue the pants off of them. But the car has been confirmed. It is going to be at Carlisle. So if you were thinking about coming to Carlisle or definitely are coming, you will see the C8 ZR1 there. Um, what else we got here? You had a point you wanted to make about the transmission, Ken.
Oh, so yeah, well, I mean the transmission. I know what this thing is basically. I mean, due to lack of better terms, is kind of unchanged. The architecture of the transmission is obviously the same, based off the same architecture, but stronger things, stronger rods, billet components, so on and so forth. But I know one of the big things that they changed in order to help make this thing so much stronger was they actually took the physical gears inside the transmission and made them wider.
Yeah.
That was the big thing that really beefed up the amount of strength of this transmission, was by simply just taking the same exact thing that's already there,
Yep.
just making it bigger. Just like you would take a bigger tire with a bigger patch against the ground to get more grip. That's really the one of the big things that they did to change it to make it better. Yeah, it's better components and things like that, but the DCT itself, for the most part, is not radically different.
Right.
It's even
No.
got the same exact ratios and
Yep.
gearing as a Z06. I'm sure the calibration is somewhat different, but it's probably just tweaked,
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to make
So
the calibration a little bit different just to help with torque management. But the Z06 engine or transmission was beefed up a little bit over the Stingray, and
yeah,
that they did the same thing with it from the Z06 to the ZR1. But what kind of to your point with making it thicker is just like I was saying with the brakes, the carbon ceramics. They're using a slightly different compound in them, which is the same thing they did with the C7 Z06 to the C7 ZR1. The compound in the front rotors was different for
hmm
better heat dissipation, but also the rotor itself is thicker because diameter wise, they kept saying that it was the largest rotor they ever put on a Corvette, but I was like, it's 15.7 in the front and 15.3 in the rear. That's what we have on the C8 Z06. It's the same size. Why are they saying it's the biggest? That's why it's thicker. But
yeah.
one other question that came up was Michael McCurry says, does it have AFM? I have not seen anything saying that this thing has AFM, and honestly, it better not. But
I
there,
can't imagine that it's going
it
to.
was something that leaked like about a year ago. It leaked in a parts catalog that it was going to have AFM. And honestly, I think GM at some point was just throwing it out there just to see what would stick on the leak stuff. There's no way this engine's going to have AFM. It can't. I mean, if you really want to throw
There,
a wrench in the works, yeah, put AFM on it. But there's just no way.
AFM also, when you come into a double overhead cam engine versus an overhead valve, AFM becomes such a
That's true.
trickier
Yeah.
system to put in.
Yep.
Now, I had originally said a little while ago when the rumors were coming out that the ZR1 possibly was going to have a 6.2
Yeah.
with twin turbos. And at that point, I had said, yeah, there is a possibility that it could have
Yeah.
AFM. But now that it's obviously the double overhead cam with the 5.5 design,
Yep.
there's no way that it's going to be so overcomplicated, which this thing already is kind of overcomplicated.
Yeah.
But
Oh, it's really overcomplicated.
yeah, I mean, there's no way that it's going to have it because there's such intricacies to that engine, that architecture of that engine, that it's so precise and delicate. I can't imagine
Yeah.
it doing that. Like to the point where when the Z06 engine came out, you know, when the LT6 originally first came out, it's to the point where when you had these little shims in between the rocker arms and the valves, or excuse, on top of the valves. Something so delicate with that is those shims are all individually marked for that specific valve on that cylinder head.
Right.
So if you ever tear one of these apart and just take
Yeah.
the shims and just throw them,
Yeah,
you
you're
just
screwed.
screwed yourself.
Yep.
So you'll never
Um,
figure it out ever again.
Stupid Fast Truck says that he drives his Stingray in manual mode just to avoid AFM. You could do that or get one of those range devices. I don't know if they approve those for C8s yet, but I tell anybody who has a Chevy, it doesn't matter if it's a Corvette, what it is. If you have a V8 Chevy engine that has AFM, get that range device immediately
Yeah.
because AFM always ends up causing a problem. It's not if, it's when. It will tank your engine eventually. Yeah, we've already kind of talked about this, Steven. I think they mentioned it in one of the ZR1 reveal trailers that there was going to be a pretty substantial gas guzzler tax, and
Yeah.
based on
Yeah.
the fact that this thing can drain the entire tank in 2 minutes under wide open throttle, it's gonna be bad. I mean, it's definitely not gonna do well.
Yeah.
Amber is just now tuning into the live. Thanks for it's better late than never, Amber. Um, if you think the Zora is going to be a package, what would it look like? Honestly, Dylan, it will look exactly like if you go to the website right now and build a Z06 and you want the Z07 package and you check that box and now it adds the ZR1 or Z07 package, that's what it's going to look like. It would just say Zora. You check that
Yeah.
and it's
I've
probably going to
been
add, if I had to guess, it's going to add obviously the front wheels, the front engine motor from the E-Ray, and it might also play a little bit with Active Aero.
appearance wise, I think it's going to be pretty much exactly unchanged. The
I agree.
only other thing I could see them maybe doing is maybe putting a different specific wheel design for it, but
Yep.
that would be about it.
I think they might do Active Aero, but even that may not change it physically, the appearance.
Yeah, it usually doesn't. Yeah.
Mr. T says, let's talk about price and who will be buying this car. So we kind of talked about price a little bit earlier. I think if this car had come out with the 850 horsepower we were told it was originally going to have, I think the 140 to 150 starting point was accurate. I think now with what we're getting, I think this price is going to start just under 200 grand.
Somebody just made a comment I think is actually kind of a very good possibility, saying a Zora option, there will be a specific color that would only be available in Zora.
That's a good point, and that would be
I think
something
that
pretty
is a
interesting.
very real
Yeah,
possibility and something I didn't even think of, and
and you know what,
I would agree
Zora,
with that.
if I can remember right, the majority of the pictures of Zora I ever saw, they were all a really pale blue.
Yeah, they're like a light, like sky
Yeah.
blue kind of.
So
Yeah,
and they did offer that a very similar color to that on the C7 for a very limited amount of time, but I could see that absolutely happening.
I completely agree. I didn't even think about that. And I was like, you know what? I think yeah, there will be a certain color that will only be available as a Zora.
Yep. And professional or Professor Corvette Lizard Green is one that I would definitely rock. And again, you're gonna have to watch the video tomorrow because I talk a lot about Lizard Green and Verde Ithaca. But Ralph Cruz says this might be a stupid question, but if the intercoolers are water to air, will the water evaporate eventually? And if so, how do you fill it? No, it won't. It's usually a pressurized system, so it doesn't evaporate. But
It's a sealed, pressurized system, yeah. Which, if you look at this system, GM has used this type of system on a lot of cars before. The most recent one that I can think of is the LF4 engine used in the CT4V Blackwing and the ATS-V, where they had the turbos
yeah,
basically
on the
cast
manifold.
in, and
Yep.
they just kind of use that same technology, you know, because it worked really well. It works really well on those engines.
Corey Payne, what's up, Corey? He says, catching you here at the end. Rob and I will see you at Corvettes at Carlisle. So if you guys didn't know, Paragon won't be there officially, but Corey and Rob will be there kind of acting independently. So if you wanted to see them or talk to them about anything, they will be in the house. Um, I the more I see this come up, the more I kind of want to do it, but I feel like it's a scumbag move. Vet Sweetness says, check and see if someone named if they donated fraudulently, basically to act blue and request a refund. Check to see if you're named. I think he's talking about the GoFundMe thing.
Oh.
If I know I would be YouTube's #1 scumbag if I actually created a GoFundMe so I could buy a ZR1. I mean, that's just not a good look at all. But G Smith says, where are we going to hang out and party Friday night, boys? Any good places in Mechanicsburg? There's a lot of good stuff to do at Carlisle. My biggest issue is, and you'll get there too if you go to Carlisle, if you're there the entire day from 8 to 5, you want to go back to the hotel and crash because the sun and the heat, it takes it out of you to the point where you do not want to do anything else. I'm going to definitely go out to dinner with a bunch of guys every night. So Shane is usually the one that kind of coordinates that stuff for us. But yeah, if you guys want to go out and do that, I'm all down for it, but it's not, I'm not going to be out all night. I can't do it anymore. Let's see. How can Paragon not be at Carlisle? That's like a burger without a bun. So believe it or not, guys, the Corvettes at Carlisle is not super lucrative for businesses to be at anymore. They the ones that come there, I've talked to a bunch of them. They typically spend as much to be there as they make from being there. So it's almost a complete wash, as if they didn't go at all. Bruno says, where's the wife? She just got home from work. So I'm actually down in Florida. She's in Pennsylvania. So she just got home. Stephen Reb says he offers the first $100 for Justin's GoFundMe. There it is. All right, Stephen. I look forward to that.
Well, if you decide to go that way, make sure you let me know if you're going to sell your Z06 because I'll be first in line to buy it from you to make up some funds that way too. So
it would have to, yeah. And that's my video coming out tomorrow. I talk a lot about the price and how I would make it work. So keep an eye out for that stuff, guys. But I want a ZR1, but at the same time, the price has to be right. If it's not, it's not. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, I am very happy with my C8 Z06. I am not going to force this if I don't have to, but if someone out there, if you really, really, really want to do that, I'll let someone else create the GoFundMe. I'm not going to do it. I can't do that. Literally, I would be on the first page of the internet as YouTube's biggest scumbag. There's no way I could do it. But anyway, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight. So if you could, where are we at? We barely missed the 200 thumbs ups, but we still have over 200 people in here watching. If all of you guys hit thumbs up, we would hit it. So smash the thumbs up on the way out. I want to give a big thumbs up. Thank you to Ken for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Check his channel out. Like I said, Squirrel Cage Garage. He does a lot of pretty technical stuff over there. You want to check that out. But that's going to do it for tonight, guys. So if you liked it, hit the thumbs up, please. I know I keep talking about it, but thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't, and we will catch you same time, same place next Monday night. See ya.
Take care.